Too many loose ends.
This is straightforward suicide.
Thank you.
Too many coincidences.
Sky's the limit.
How did you know she was dead?
When strong-arm tactics fail,
I want to know what it was Cross had that you wanted.
maybe it's time
He's a policeman with his job to do.
for a woman's touch.
I'm a scientist with mine.
Is she doing your job now?
Fridays, Make a Date with Sam. Amanda Burton in Silent Witness, Friday, 9:30 on BBC1.
Donald Sutherland and Helen Mirren star in the story of the Western doctor who, despite his unstable private life, became a hero of the people of China, on BBC2 shortly. Here on BBC1 now, the 9 o'clock news with Peter Sissons.
The conviction of a top tax investigator for corruption shakes the Inland Revenue. Michael Alcock will be sentenced tomorrow for accepting bribes of cash, holidays and sex. Adopted by a British couple, the 4-year-old whose family in Bosnia may go to law to get her back. And something to celebrate at last as England win a series in style and the captain returns to form. Good evening. The Old Bailey today saw the climax to the biggest corruption scandal ever to hit the Inland Revenue. Michael Alcock, a senior official involved in tracking down wealthy tax dodgers, was found guilty on 6 out of 11 charges of taking bribes in cash and kind from people whose affairs he was investigating. He'll be sentenced tomorrow. During the 4-month trial, the prosecution described the scale of the bribes as quite breathtaking. The Inland Revenue confirmed tonight that several taxmen of inspector level now face internal inquiries. From the Old Bailey, John Fryer.
Michael Alcock was no ordinary tax inspector. The brash soldier's son from Colchester, who left school with 5 O-levels, ran a special unit called the Ghostbusters, tracking foreign businessmen. But the Old Bailey court heard he was paid bribes on a breathtaking scale. Working from this office block in central London, Alcock took one all-expenses-paid transatlantic trip, which alone was worth half his annual salary. He also corruptly accepted cash payments worth £15,000, all in exchange for letting rich men off tax. One businessman provided Alcock with the services of this prostitute, Michelle Corrigan. Alcock showered her with gifts paid for from his 11 personal bank accounts. Miss Corrigan says they fell in love, just like the film Pretty Woman.
I want to show you this car we got today.
But Alcock's wife Sally had stood by him. They've just celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Mrs. Alcock, who's been suffering from cancer, said the couple had endured some dark times, but he wasn't corrupt. Alcock said he'd operated to his own rules.
I was given a free rein to conduct my investigations how I wanted. Nothing of that has been hidden throughout. I operated how I thought we should operate. Now all of a sudden it isn't the way to do things.
Alcock told me he'd accepted hospitality but not bribes.
In the UK, the cynical approach is there's no such thing as a free lunch. That doesn't apply in the Middle East. It's an offence to the host if he offers you hospitality and you refuse it.
The Inland Revenue has since tightened up the rules. Officials must decline gifts, hospitality or entertainment. There's stringent control on foreign travel, and staff are regularly moved between offices.
This has been an exceptional case for the Inland Revenue. Our work demands the highest level of integrity from our staff when carrying out their duties. Any member of our staff who lapses from that high standard must be prepared to face the consequences of their action.
At Inland Revenue headquarters, it was recognised Alcock had been a formidable investigator, but officials deny his claim they condoned wealthy tax targets funding his trips abroad. The jury had been deliberating more than 6 days before convicting Michael Alcock. He's the most senior tax official to face such charges, making this the biggest ever scandal to engulf the Inland Revenue. John Fryer, BBC News at the Old Bailey.
The surviving relatives of a 4-year-old Bosnian girl who's been adopted by a British family are considering legal action to get her back. Edita Karanovic was orphaned when Serbian soldiers massacred her village. Yesterday, a High Court judge said the child should stay with her new parents, even though they'd given an adoption hearing a wholly inaccurate account of her background.
At the home he's made in Switzerland, Hasan Koranovic weighs up the chances of getting his granddaughter back. Photographs are all that he has to remind him of Edita, survivor of a massacre in which her mother was murdered by Serbian soldiers.
It is not justice that she is with another family. It will be justice when she is here with her own family.
Edita Koranovic, filmed here in the summer of 1995, is being brought up by British foster parents. Alan Fowler and his wife Deborah adopted Edita when she was a baby. A senior judge, Sir Stephen Brown, has now set aside that order because he said the court which allowed the Fowlers to adopt the little girl was given a wholly inaccurate and misleading factual account of the circumstances in which Edita was found and of her origins. But he said the Fowlers should continue to care for her. It is essential for Edita's well-being that there should be stability and security in her young life.
Edita should be here with me and my family, where she can be brought up in the knowledge of her tradition, her culture, language and religion. She is my granddaughter, all I have got left of my son and daughter-in-law after the massacre.
From his adopted country of Switzerland, Hasan Koranovic is considering whether he can appeal against the judge's decision. But there was support for the court's ruling from an organisation which represents families who've adopted children from abroad.
It's sadly a very messy, very tragic situation, and I think the judge was in an appallingly difficult position. But he recognised that this little girl, having lost her birth mother in this terrible fashion, should not now, age 5, have to lose the woman she's come to regard as her mother. He realised that would just be simply too much for her.
Edita will have regular contact with her Bosnian relatives. The Fowler family were reminded by the court that Edita is a Koranovic and she must get to know about her true family background. Mr. and Mrs. Fowler have made no comment on the court's ruling. Joshua Rosenberg, BBC News.
International troops in Bosnia say they're prepared to confront any further violence in the city of Mostar, where one person died and more than 30 were wounded last week in clashes between Croats and Muslims. The fighting was the worst seen in the city since the end of the Bosnian conflict. During the war, Mostar was almost destroyed as its Muslim and Croat residents took up arms against each other. The city remains divided. Muslims control its eastern side, Croats control the west. And as our chief news correspondent Kate Adey reports, attempts to reunite the two are floundering.
After more than 2.5 years of peace, with bridge building both concrete and in spirit, the town of Mostar is this week seething with resentment and fear. All the efforts to join together Croats and Muslims have fallen apart. It's worse than the war, says this Muslim woman. It's horrible. There's tension, there's fear, says another Muslim. There are incidents. They're talking about a shooting a week ago. Muslims went to visit a graveyard on the Croat side of the river. Croat police were waiting. Muslims were beaten, Croats were stabbed, shots were fired. A Muslim man died. The whole episode reeked of premeditation, possibly on both sides. Now on the Muslim riverbank, shops are shuttered, the community is frightened. No one, Croat or Muslim, crosses the new bridge, and every single venture which was meant to unify the town has collapsed. Taxis won't drive across. The Croats have left the joint police station. The town's mayors won't meet, and Muslim families who still live on the Croat side are being threatened and forced out of their homes. The international organizations who've labored to rebuild and reconcile are privately despairing. Today at a press conference, exhorting the local journalists of both sides not to stir things up and trying to generate some optimism.
Admittedly, it's a particularly rough period, but I always liken events in Mostar to climbing a very rocky mountain. There are rocks and ravines and valleys and precipices on the way, but we haven't fallen over the edge yet.
Backing his good intentions are a body of international police and the formidable NATO-led force. Both today attempted to get Mrs. Amira Hoylash back into her flat. Threatened by her Croat neighbors, she'd sought safety across the river. Today, Hungarian policemen, Spanish soldiers and some surly Croat police escorted her back to her front door, only to find the locks changed and an iron grille welded across it. This and a combination of local legal niceties and an unpleasant atmosphere despite the international protection, sent Mrs. Hoylash away, another victim of Mostar's deepening divide.
Huge amounts of money and international effort have been spent on this town. There are foreign soldiers and policemen, charities, aid organizations, advisors and administrators here. The town they have tried to resurrect and unify is still divided, and it's not a good omen for the rest of Bosnia. Kate Adey, BBC News, Mostar.
A 44-year-old man who was arrested in connection with the murder of the 13-year-old Billie-Jo Jenkins in Hastings has been released into the care of his local health authority. Detectives say he hasn't been eliminated from their inquiries. Today, Billie-Jo's legal guardians spoke of their devastation at her murder. Clive Myrie reports.
3 days after Billie-Jo Jenkins' horrific murder, her legal guardians, Sean and Lois, spoke for the first time about their loss.
As a family, we are totally devastated. We do not understand why our daughter has been murdered or what the motive could possibly be. She had numerous ambitions and brought joy into the lives of everyone. She was a very perceptive young woman who enjoyed life to the full.
That life was cut short last Saturday when Billie-Jo Jenkins was bludgeoned to death with an 18-inch long metal tent spike in the back garden of the family home. Today it was revealed that 2 years ago Billie-Jo had told friends she believed she was being stalked. It's also emerged that the family had been concerned about prowlers.
I believe it was in December that a neighbour reported somebody, to my knowledge, standing on the windowsill looking into our front room, and when I got home the police were outside and they came into the house and they dealt with it.
Today, scene of crime officers have been continuing their investigations in the area near Billie-Jo Jenkins' home. Detectives say they want to talk to a man